always live comfortably below your means.
Yeah, because it's not what you make.
It's what you keep.
There you go. There you go.
Hello, family, and welcome back. I'm here as always with my husband, LeVar Harris.
I'm out here with my beautiful wife, Rian Swafford Harris.
And we're here to start the conversations in and around topics of finance that we feel we should all be having, with the hopes that you will find the language you need here to continue the conversations in your own homes.
So let's talk money.
So today we want to discuss the 8 financial tips that we believe, you should learn while you're young. They're tips that we learned still in our youth. I guess we're still considered young, that have really made a big difference in the long term. Money is one of the tools that, if you kind of learn and take an interest in at an early age, it literally pays off, right? So I think that's kind of why we want to discuss some of the things that are good to learn now.
We're going to do our top 8, so we'll do 4 individually, and then get to the total 8.
Okay, so what's your first tip?
So actually, my first one is think of money as a tool.
Okay.
Don't oversave. I had a huge, I don't know if it's from my upbringing or just learning to just hoard money and just look at it in my savings account or any kind of account I had. But then I realized actually working at the bank, a lot of the wealthier clients always told me, like, that money, you should have it go to work for you because it's only as good as what you put it to use for. So obviously we've been able to see a lot of a good return in terms of investments and buying, of course, rental properties, etc. in that regards.
So when you say use it as a tool, you mean like you said, don't keep it in the bank, but actually spend it in a way that's going to produce value long term, or?
Yeah, essentially. So you can keep it in the bank. Hopefully it's in some kind of investment vehicle within the bank. But yeah, don't just have it sitting under your couch or under your mattress or in a savings account. Of course, you should have at least a cushion just in case, of course, emergencies and rainy days, if you're saving for something particular, but definitely be sure to use it to advance your means as opposed to just hoarding it.
So my number one tip is learn how to use a credit card the right way the first time.
The right way.
I know a lot of us get into credit card debt early on in our youth that kind of we carry into our adulthood and, to your senior and elder years, and it's really unfortunate. But another thing sometimes we do is we avoid it altogether because we just hear these stories, whether from family or just people around us, of how they got into so much credit card debt. So we avoid it and we just use debit cards or cash, and you kind of think well, if I don't have it, then I'm not going to buy it. And that is true. But if you are, living in Northern America anyways, credit is essential here. It kind of determines your ability for upward mobility, or whether it's a home or it's a car or it's a small business loan, what have you. Credit really matters here. It's not just what's in your bank account, but they want you to be able to show that you use it responsibly. So some of the ways that I think are good to learn about using a credit card is to use your points to pay off your balance in full each month. And to make sure that you never are using more than 30% of your credit limit, because that is going to affect your credit score as well. So I think it's important to get a credit card when you're young, to always update the credit limit amount when you get a raise, promotion, what have you. And yeah, just keep yourself at that 30% max on whatever your limit is. Always pay your credit card off in full. Use your points, right? You can use your points with whether it's airlines, hotels, to take vacations, whether it's food. There's Uber credit cards for whatever you use in your daily life. Go ahead and get a credit card that's going to correspond with points. So yeah, I just think it's really important to learn how to use your credit card early, correctly, and not get yourself into debt and have this negative stigma.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think you should find a fun credit card, so something that really caters to your life. So I have a credit card that pays cash back for anytime we eat out. So I look forward to paying for things when we eat out, even though I'm still spending money to a certain extent.
But you'd be doing it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the key.
Yeah, and I'm the trip planner between us. I'm the one who I don't know, I love looking at itineraries and making plans. And so I make sure that I have a travel credit card, right? So I use a lot of those points to be able to book our hotels, book our flights. So we just use it in a way that, hey, we're going to pay cash this anyways. We have the cash in the bank. As soon as we get that statement, we pay it off. So that is what's really key.
Yeah. Okay. So my number 2 is pretty specific for the stock market, but holding, or it could be any investment in general, but holding long term. I have learned that trying to time the market is not the most profitable habit. There's actually studies that show you actually lose money in the long run. Buy good companies, buy good assets, buy good investments, and just hold them. Think long term. Don't try to flip it or turn it in quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's much easier to do that when you're investing with money that you don't need necessarily, right? So like that's kind of something we do is that at the end of every month, and we pay our bills, we pay our tithes, what have you. We kind of look at what is our disposable income, and one of the ways he likes to spend his disposable income is to invest it. And so that way,
one of the ways or the way,
other things sometimes.
Barely.
So it's much easier to not feel like, okay, I actually need this money. I need to pull out when I see my stock going down or whatever. Like you just see on sitcoms or like refreshing the app, like they're just losing money fast and they get scared and they pull out. But if it's not money that you quote unquote need, right, then it's much easier to like be relaxed about it and ride the wave.
For sure.
So my number 2 is something that I was not doing in undergrad, but I quickly switched the habit when I got to my postgraduate degree, and that is not accepting the full loan amount. So,
yeah, that's a big one.
Wait, you didn't even have loans.
I know, it's still a big one for our generation.
So in undergrad, I took out loans for my cost of living. I was fortunate enough to be on a track scholarship that paid like tuition, but there's so much more to school than tuition.
For sure.
So anyway, at the end of every quarter, right, after your loan paid your tuition or like whatever it pays, I don't know, then you got what we called a refund check, right, which is like the remaining parts of your loan that weren't used directly for the tuition.
That's such a terrible label.
Yeah, I don't even know what the real name is. That's just what we called it in college. And so it was like refund check day. We were all excited to have like money in our bank account, not realizing that like all of that was going to be compounded with interest like over the years, right? And my tuition was only X amount, right? The actual money I needed for like my living expenses, which would be like my food and my rent, and that's pretty much all you have in college, right? That was only so much, right? And then after that, I would have like thousands of dollars left over to just live off of that I didn't need, right? Like I was buying things I didn't need. I was going shopping for like ridiculous clothes that I don't have today, right? Just things that like aren't significant. Yeah, and so we kind of all have this habit, and like that is loans that I have to pay back, and you don't think of it that way because you're just young and you don't have a lot of guidance and you're just out there.
I had a friend in college, I won't say his name, but he switched his major from like engineering to like more of like a arts degree. Mm-hmm. So he had at least less classes that he needed to complete. So he had this huge refund check. Yeah. He took us all to Vegas.
Yeah, see, we were doing things like that. We went to school in Southern California, so Vegas is like a 4-hour trip. It's you just do things like that. But when I got to law school and I was filling out my loan things each whatever year, after my tuition and my housing was cleared, I did not accept the full loan amount. Like on the actual computer, I said no, whatever, and I just accepted a smaller portion. And I lived off of that, and that made a huge difference in my in what I had to later pay back. Like, yeah, did I have the most comfortable apartment? Like, like it's a funny story, but I was living in Westwood for my first year because that was fully paid. So I was like, yeah, if you want to put me in like that student housing. But then when it was on my dime for my second and third year, I moved to Culver City. And yes, it's still very nice, comparatively, but it's not Westwood. But it saved me a whole heck of a lot of money, added 10 minutes to my commute, whatever. But that's just an example. Whereas in undergrad, I would have stayed in Westwood for 4 years, like not even realizing, what I was doing and how much unnecessary money I was taking out. Yeah. So, yeah.
Number 3 for me is exploring and expanding your network at a deeper level. And I was blessed to be able to have this exposure. I worked at the bank and interacting with different clients. I think that individuals or people in general have a bad habit of just hanging around like-minded people. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of trapping themselves into this one way of thinking as opposed to learning how different cultures are able to maximize their money or save money or learn different tips and tricks. Mm-hmm. So that's something that really benefited me in the long run.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that Again, like my undergrad, postgraduate experience. In undergrad, I kind of hung out with people with like the same cultural backgrounds of me, who were raised the same way,
It's
and a
comfortable.
lot of yeah, and I think a lot of that comes when you're on. I ran track in college, so when you're on a team, generally you're hanging out with people who were just like you, kind of had the same lifestyle as you to get to where you guys are. But when I got to law school, in some ways, even though UCR is like a super diverse campus comparative to UCLA,
And you
but
see.
for me, yeah, and UC, but for me, UCLA in some ways was more diverse as far as your thoughts, right? And I know that's not something we like necessarily think about when we think diversity, but diversity of thought is really huge, and it kind of opened my world to like a lot of cultures, you know. So yeah, that's I can totally agree with that, and just kind of comparing childhood stories and the things their parents did to sacrifice, you know, for education. You know, it was just really eye opening and kind of like changed my perspective a lot and what I'd want to prioritize, you know, for our future kids someday.
Yeah.
So my number three kind of goes hand in hand with my second tip, which is living below your means.
My
So
favorite. My favorite.
yeah. So again, like I said, I started doing this in law school, and it carried this kind of like habit carried through my professional career. So I know, you know, a ton of lawyers, and you know, we do make good money, but just some of the things that, you know, just in casual conversations we talk about the things we expense just because like our time is more valuable. It can be very costly, and so you find yourself living this lifestyle with you're kind of like exporting everything from like your clothes being clean to your home being clean to your dog walkers to, you know, having people cook your meals. Like it can get, you know, pretty extravagant, to the car you drive for comfort. Just think of all these things, right, that aren't necessary, quote unquote, right? But then you get trapped with this lifestyle where you have to kind of keep the same pace in working these like 60 hours a week for like the rest of your life, because you kind of set yourself up in a certain way to where you're relying on your job. You're kind of like living to work instead of working to live.
Yeah.
And even though I am still in that rat race at the moment, I take comfort knowing that I don't have to. Like we haven't set up a lifestyle to where we need my exact income. So if it ever got overwhelming, or if it ever got too much, I know we have a safety net that, you know, even for 6 months I could take off not working at all and just like find myself and what I wanted to do. And that kind of helps a lot because I do have a stressful career, and I know a lot. Does that make sense? A stressful career?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. I know what it's I know I have a stressful career, and I know a lot of us, you know, have stressful careers. But again, if you're kind of like maxing out your lifestyle, and I get it, you know, you do want to have comfort in return for like the hours that you work, especially as an American. But to some point, you have to kind of think about like, am I kind of trapping myself? Am I ever going to get out of this race? So one way to kind of counteract that is to just always live comfortably below your means.
Yeah, because it's not what you make.
It's what you keep.
There you go. There you go. It's funny because in sales they actually like try to encourage you to buy very expensive things, so that way you
Mhm.
work twice as hard to maintain that level.
Yeah, it's a trap for
Yeah, it's
sure.
definitely a trap.
Yeah.
So number four is take risks. Take as many risks as possible, especially when you're young, because you have enough time to make up any kind of lost money that you make on any kind of investment.
Mhm.
I had a really bad habit of being fearful to take risks, but a famous saying is "You're never going to win if you never try or never play." So again, if you sprinkle your money across multiple different investments, one of them may hit, but if you don't actually try, then it's never going to hit. So always keep that in mind.
And my number four, I think, also kind of goes hand in hand with yours, which is to know that not all debt is bad debt. And I know that kind of seems counterintuitive for me to say, like, don't be in a rush to like immediately pay off your student loans. But as an example, for us, we were living in the Bay Area and we knew we wanted to be homeowners. Like the rent we were paying was to us what we could be paying on a mortgage.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that is the case. And so instead of, you know, immediately putting 100% of our disposable income to my student loans, we started saving for a house as soon as we got there, right? And then in less than a year, we were able to save up for that down payment. Of course, I was still making my loan payments, you know, at that time.
Payments, yeah.
But it was the minimum. I wasn't like maxing out what I could. And for us, we knew that if we were going to focus on paying off my loans, it was still going to take like 5 years to do that. But in 5 years, what the Bay Area homes were costing, we would not have been able to afford at that point. So for us, it was better to get into a home quickly that we could afford, let that equity start building as we were paying off our loans. So I was paying a bunch of money off my loans that we knew were making money on the back end because we invested into this home. And that kind of like, I mean, it did work out for us. And I know a lot of people who are, more senior to me in my career, and I say that specifically because lawyers have a lot of student loans. It's an expensive career to get into, and so their student loan debt, it's daunting. And so of course they want to do the responsible thing, and so they focused on paying it. But then when they came out of it, they couldn't afford a home, and so by the time they saved up to get a home, they had to spend a whole heck of a lot more than if they would have got a home at their entry salary, or all those years they were just paying rent, right? And along with their student loans, and the rent is a lot too. So you're kind of just like losing money on top of losing money. So for us, we kind of were okay knowing like, okay, we're going to take maybe a year more to pay off this student loan, but in the end, we were investing that whole time in the home.
Yeah.
So
and we also know with mortgages, obviously you can expense or write off the interest on the loan. So there's value in that but the student loans at that time, given the income that we were making, we weren't allowed to write that off.
Exactly.
So it was,
that's the case for a lot of people with professional degrees, know. So yeah, just kind of be okay with like, as long as you have a plan to pay the debt off, don't think like I have to pay this debt off first before I can do anything else in life. Kind of work
strategic.
Yeah. Okay, that works. So we hope you enjoyed those 8 tips that, have really impacted our life, and we were fortunate to have the guidance to kind of learn while we were still young. So hopefully you can start implementing any that apply to your life right away, because again, the sooner you start, the bigger the payoff is in the end.
Hopefully.
So yeah, let us know what other topics you want to hear from us, how else we can help. We try and post a video every week, right?
Yeah, and if you have any tips of your own, definitely let us know as well in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, subscribe, and until next time, fam.
See ya.